We have a session on mindfulness, education, and the sustainable development by Ms. Diamond C.C. Preston. She is the president and CEO of Hello, Madam President. She's branded as Dr. Posh and is a Posh protocol specialist, the nation's only etiquetician, she says. And she is a dedicated and experienced speaker, author, and business strategist. She's a Christian ordained minister and an ambassador for Jesus Christ. Hello, Madam President, founded by Ms. Diamond C.C. Preston, has given sustainability development a priority focus by offering a remote workplace which eliminates travel to our offices, contributing to a reduction in vehicle emissions. Additionally, her business strategies are refined to include energy conservation and water waste reduction. Thank you so much, Ms. Diamond Preston, for joining us today in the summit. Over to you for your session.
Thank you so much, Aparna. Hello, everyone, and thank you for the opportunity to be here. I'm very honored to be here with all of you on today. Welcome to the summit on today. All right. So specifically, my assignment today is to talk to you about mindfulness and education as it relates to sustainable development. So we're going to focus on that. Next slide. But before we delve into the meat of our discussion on today, I do want us to be aware that that we're one global community. And I know we live in different countries, we live in different communities, we have different languages, but it's important to know that as a people, as humans that occupy this particular space here on this planet Earth, we're one global community. And I think it's important to keep that in mind as we continue our discussion today about sustainable development. Next slide, please. All right, so this is the order in which we're going to discuss our items on today. We're going to start out talking about sustainable development, and I know many of you have probably heard various definitions of it, and so I have some information I want to share with you, and the definition that I have, actually several of them. So we're going to start out talking about that, and then we're going to move on to mindfulness, education, and then after that, we're going to conclude my portion of the summit talk on today. Next slide. All right, so let's just talk about sustainable development. And the first thing that I want to say about it is that it is a principle for obtaining human development goals while concurrently or at the same time sustaining natural resource systems and ecosystems that our economy depends on and that we as a society depend on, right? And so that's the main focus of the definition that I want to talk about. But it's more than that. You know, if we delve deeper, there's more details to be discussed regarding it. So we can also say it is development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs, right? And so this connectivity that I want to discuss, I want to discuss it in these terms. It is a mutual respectability, right, of the connectivity of, number one, our social needs, our environmental needs, and our economic needs. But they're all intertwined together. They're interlocked together, right? They're not separate, that we deal with them each separately. They're all interconnected together. And so when we discuss them and address those needs, we need to make sure that we are addressing the connectivity of those needs as well at the same time. Regarding history, you can research information about sustainable development. This conversation started way back even in the 1700s, because the people then at that time were mindful enough. They had the presence of mind to know that if our population continues to grow as it is right now, we could very well outpace the natural resources and things are in our environment that we are dependent on, and that would put our future generations in peril. So this is a long time discussion that has been going on, and that just shows the importance of the gravity of the conversation that we should be having about sustainable development, because oftentimes we can get caught up, or we can focus on what is happening to us right now, not realizing that there will be people here in the future after we are gone, right? And they need to have natural resources and things in our environment. They need to have a viable economy that they can depend on and work into and make a nice standard of living. So we have to make sure that we realize that it's not just about us, right now, right here and right now, but it's also about our future generations. And that's what makes this topic so important. Next slide. So we're going to move right into mindfulness and what that is and what that means, specifically what that means in relation to sustainable development. Next slide. So when we talk about mindfulness, we're talking about mindfulness means to be aware, right? To be aware of something, to have it as our focus or in the forefront of our mind. So when we talk about sustainable development, in mindfulness, we need to have it aware. We need to be aware of it and not just think of it as someone else's responsibility, something that someone else is charged with or something that they are responsible for doing, right? It's us. And one of the ways that we can do that and make sure we're mindful of it is to turn it into an internal interest of ours, right? To get involved, right? And make sure it's an interest that we are wholeheartedly interested in. It's not something that someone outside is telling us. It's actually something that we are really interested in ourselves. And that will keep it in our mind. That will make us mindful of it and keep it as a forefront focus in our lives, right? But not only that, mindfulness goes further than that. And it is part of sharing our thoughts with others, right? We need to spread the information. We need to spread the news, because that not only helps that other person who is hearing that information, but it also helps us to make sure that we continue to focus on it. Every time we discuss it, it refreshes itself in our mind, right? And that's one of the ways, of course, that we can keep it fresh and focused in us as well. So we need to share that information. And additionally, we need to have adaptability. And what I mean by that is, as new technology arises and new tools, right, and new methods of thinking about sustainable development and walking out sustainable development, we need to be adaptable. We need to make sure that we're able to evolve and adapt to these new ways of handling things, these new ways of thinking about it, and not get left behind about what is happening now, right? Not continue the old way of doing things, but be adaptable enough where we then embrace a whole new method of doing the same things that we were doing before. It's just a different way of doing it, okay? So we just need to be adaptable and flexible and be able to flow with new changes, all right? Next slide, please. And so now we move on to the main focus of what I want to talk about, which is education. I love education and learning and academia. I love education. So this is the part that I've been wanting to talk about the most. Next slide. So as we talk about education, the items that you see here, read and seek, attend summits and conferences, become actively involved and educate others. Those are actually what I want to talk about after we talk about how to be a lifelong learner, right? After we become a lifelong learner, then these things become more relevant to us. But before we discuss those, the items that you're seeing there, I want to first discuss some other important information about education as it relates to our goal for today, goal number 4, which is to ensure inclusive and equitable quality education and promote lifelong learning opportunities for all. And the first thing I want to talk about when it in regards to that is open access to education, right? We need to have the foundations in place where communities have access to primary education, secondary education, and university education. That's for first and foremost. It needs to be available. It needs to be accessible to all. You know, every person in that community, it needs to be there, and the programs need to be set up so that people have access to that education that is there. But in addition to that, having the access and having the academic programs set up, we need to remove barriers. And that may sound like it's the same thing, but it's actually different. When I talk about removing barriers, what I mean is removing barriers to getting the education that's already been set up through access. So that means removing political barriers, not just hoarding education for people who are part of a particular political affiliation, not just having education for a specific gender, Oftentimes in some of our communities around the world, education is reserved for male children and not girls. Girls are oftentimes prevented from going to school, or there are extra barriers between the girls going to school. So that's what I mean about removing those barriers. And there also can be economic barriers. Those persons who are the wealthy part of the society, they have access to specific education where others in that society may not have that same access. So that's what I mean about having removing those barriers. And then the next thing I want to talk about is promoting participation, right? Because we've heard that term before, that knowledge is power, but we really need to focus on the fact that applied knowledge is power, right? Doing is how we actually learn. So someone can collect a lot of information and be very knowledgeable about it, but they never actually walk out that knowledge that they have. They don't apply it. And so that's where your power becomes when it's related to education. You have to apply the knowledge that you actually have. So applied knowledge is power. So when we talk about education, we also need to talk about walking out that education and promoting participation. And then finally, instilling education ownership, right? That's how you will birth lifetime learners, is that person adopts education as their own. They own it. They're personally responsible for it. And as a result of being personally responsible for it, they then take on the responsibility to make sure that they continue to learn and grow throughout their lifespan. But they have to own it as a responsibility within themselves. And that then births the desire for lifelong learning within them. All right. And then now back to the slide that you're seeing where you read and seek. This is when you are a lifelong learner in education. These are some of the ways that you can continue to educate yourself. Attend summits and conferences like the one that you're attending today. Become actively involved. We have to do what it is that we're being educated on. And lastly, educate others, right? Share that information with other people and make sure those other people are educated as well. All right. Next slide. So see, these are some of the ways in general that you can implement sustainable development, right? Just overall, some of the things that we should be concerned about: conserving energy, recycling, avoiding adverse behaviors. And when I say that, I mean avoiding behaviors that will shorten your lifespan, right? Because we're not only sustaining our economic needs and our environmental needs, we're sustaining our social needs as well. So we need to sustain ourselves as human beings. So that's what I mean, avoiding adverse behaviors, and also in promoting the inclusion of others. Education is for everyone. It's open to everybody. And so I want us to always have that at the forefront of our mind, of our thinking. So these are just some of the ways that we can, that I want us to think in a broad sense about sustainable development, just overall. And then on top of that, we need to be mindful of the education and how it relates to sustainable development. All right, next slide, please. All right, so as we bring our talk today to a close, I want us to be mindful. Again, we're going to go back to how we showed that world map where we are one global community. So think about our brothers and sisters all over the world and the needs that we have as a society. Remember that connectedness that we talked about, the social needs, the environmental needs, and the economic needs. And it makes us all one global community. So think about that. Think locally, but then act globally. All right. And then we're all responsible for sustaining our global community. All of us. It's not the next person's responsibility. It's ours as well. And future generations that come after that, they're either going to reap the benefits or they're going to suffer the consequences of what we do today. And so we must be proactive in our sustainable development goals. And I'm confident that together that we can achieve these goals. Next slide, please. Thank you so much. So that concludes our discussion, or my portion of today's summit discussion. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Ms. Diamond Preston, for that wonderful and inspiring session. Thank you for joining us today. And as you said, lifelong learning is very important. And along with developing ourselves, understanding that we are one global community, becoming actively involved in social activities, and educating others also have to be added to our list of things to do. Thank you so much for joining us today and inspiring us. Thank you, Ms.
Thank you. Thank you.